Beneath countless pairs of eyes, the woman takes off her coat in plain sight, then hands it over to an onlooker. She stares at the greedy gazes all around her, yet she has no choice. The woman's name is Lucky. Ironically, luck is the last thing she has. Misfortune hounds her relentlessly. Just the night before, she was a multimillionaire holding $10 million in cash. But when she woke up, all the money had vanished without a trace. Worse still, every law enforcement agency and criminal gang across America was hunting her down. Anyone nearby could be an assassin sent to kill her. Flashback to the previous night. Lucky and her boyfriend Carrie arrived at this hotel with 2 huge suitcases crammed full of cash, a total of $10 million. Carrie wrapped his arms around Lucky from behind and whispered about the wonderful life they would have once they left this place. He painted a bright future for her. Still, Lucky could not shake her unease. Carrying 2 suitcases stuffed with money was far too conspicuous. Carrie told her not to worry. This was a top-tier hotel equipped with the highest level of security. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Persuaded by her boyfriend, Lucky gradually let her guard down. Later, the two headed down to the bar to party. Before long, Lucky had drunk too much. Seeing this, Carrie invited her out to the balcony for some fresh air. Gazing at the stunning night view and intoxicated by alcohol, they drew closer to each other. Then Carrie suggested another drink to celebrate their fantastic trip. Completely unsuspecting, Lucky raised her glass and drained it in one gulp. A cold smirk crossed Carrie's face. He pulled Lucky tightly into his embrace. Lucky was ready to pick up where they left off, but soon she felt her head spinning. When she regained consciousness, it was already 11:30 the next morning. Lucky glanced at the alarm clock and paled instantly. She stumbled to her feet and called out for her boyfriend, but there was no reply. The 2 suitcases full of cash were gone. Lucky collapsed to the floor. She knew she had been betrayed, but there was no time for regret. She chugged a large glass of ice water to clear her head. She had to find Carrie and get that massive sum of money back. At that moment, police sirens wailed outside the hotel. A fleet of police cars pulled up out front. The lead officer, known as Detective Black, stepped out and ordered her men to seal off every exit of the hotel. Hundreds of officers rushed inside to question every guest, asking if anyone had seen the 2 people in the photographs, Lucky and Carrie. Disguised, Lucky had just walked downstairs. Spotting officers conducting a search, she grew instantly alert. Right then, the lobby television cut to an emergency news bulletin, a nationwide wanted notice for Lucky and Carrie. The report claimed their biofuel scam had defrauded the U.S. government of more than $200 million. Now all blame for the crime had fallen squarely on Lucky and Carrie. In everyone's eyes, they were walking fortunes. The sudden manhunt threatened to overwhelm Lucky. She forced herself to stay calm, pulling her hood low over her face, hoping no one would recognize her. Meanwhile, Detective Black found the hotel manager and demanded access to all security camera footage. The manager refused, citing Nevada state law. Annoyed by his refusal to cooperate, Black wasted no more words and ordered her officers to conduct a forced search of the security office. Back to Lucky. She slipped quietly through the crowd and nearly reached an exit, only to find it blocked by police. She had to find another way out. Lucky stepped into an elevator and narrowly passed several searching officers. When the elevator doors opened, she saw more officers patrolling the hallway, closing in on her position. Then she spotted a linen cart nearby. An idea struck her. She pretended to be a hotel staff member, hiding her body behind the cart. As she passed the stairwell entrance, she darted inside. There were no surveillance cameras in the emergency stairwell, and Lucky could finally catch her breath. Yet she was far from safe. Without hesitation, she headed straight for the ground floor. At the same time, Detective Black and her team broke into Lucky's hotel room. It was already empty. She had left in such a hurry that she left plenty of evidence behind. The experienced detective took one quick look and determined Lucky had fled only recently, while Carrie had been gone much longer, having tidied up all his belongings thoroughly. She began to suspect the pair had fallen out. Disputes over split loot were extremely common. Black immediately ordered all officers to remain on high alert. Shortly after, officers in the security room sent word Lucky had disguised herself as a cleaner and fled into the emergency stairwell. Detective Black rushed downstairs with her team. Down in the casino, Lucky stole a baseball cap to conceal her features, planning to blend into the crowd and escape the hotel. But the moment she reached the main entrance, she spotted a man in sunglasses standing watch outside. Lucky was instantly horrified. She recognized the man in sunglasses. He was the hitman sent by the gang. If she fell into his hands, she would surely die. Lucky spun around at once, yet this abrupt movement immediately caught the killer's attention, and he walked straight into the hotel. Focused solely on evading the assassin, Lucky crashed straight into Detective Black and her team. They identified her instantly and ordered all officers to give chase. Lucky broke into a run. The killer frowned slightly upon seeing this. He saw no need to compete with the police for his target, so he quietly backed out of the hotel. Inside the casino, Lucky darted wildly to escape pursuit, yet police officers were everywhere. Her bright red hoodie made her far too conspicuous, and she would be caught sooner or later. At a corner, she quickly took off her jacket, ignoring the stares from onlookers, desperate to flee. But to her dread, Detective Black was still closing in. Lucky scrambled over a railing, pushed through the crowd, and fled into the kitchen area. She grabbed an empty beer crate and pretended to be a staff member, avoiding immediate exposure. She hurried through the kitchen and stole an access card from a cook. Kitchens usually had a dedicated delivery entrance, and for once, luck favored Lucky. The first door she opened led straight to the delivery passage. Still, she froze once she reached the lower level. The space was wide open, offering nowhere to hide. Detective Black and her men were already closing in on the kitchen. With no other options, Lucky decided to take a gamble and sprinted toward the other side of the lobby, hoping to find somewhere to hide. There was always a way out, and she discovered another passage. She snatched a coat hanging on the wall for another disguise, then used the access card to pass through 2 security gates. She spotted a driver unloading supplies. Another idea popped into her head. She pulled out a compact mirror and smudged her face to fake bruises. Putting on a pitiful expression, she walked over to the driver and begged for help. Lucky lied that her boyfriend was abusing her and chasing her, pleading for him to take her away. Moved by her distraught look, the driver helped her into the passenger seat and promised to drive her off once he finished unloading. Sitting in the vehicle, Lucky prayed he would hurry. Meanwhile, Detective Black's team reached the delivery zone but were blocked without access cards. Her officers immediately contacted the hotel manager, yet they were too late. By the time they rushed into the unloading area, the driver had already driven away. Now safely outside the hotel, Lucky's thoughts drifted to her father. If not for his reckless scheme, she would never be in this predicament. It was her father who had proposed the plan. After long observation, he uncovered loopholes in the gang's ledgers and plotted with his daughter to steal $10 million from them. Lucky had objected at the time, warning it was far too risky. If they were caught, both would be killed. But her father had sworn the operation would be flawless. A sudden jolt from braking pulled Lucky back from her memories. She picked up her fully charged phone and put on a helpless act, asking the driver for some money for travel fares. The driver gave her a cold glance. He had seen through her disguise all along. Still, he had a daughter around Lucky's age, which softened his heart and made him agree to help. After a brief hesitation, he pulled out a stack of cash and lent it to her. Lucky's heart was filled with mixed emotions. Once she was clear of danger, she called Carrie. Unsurprisingly, his phone was powered off. From this point on, she could only rely on herself. She walked into a convenience store and bought a bottle of hair dye. When she stepped back outside, her long red hair had been transformed into short blonde locks. She headed to a bus station and spotted a tourist group bound for the canyon. A new plan formed in her mind. Lucky bought a ticket for the canyon tour bus and stayed hidden in a corner. She waited until police finished checking the other passengers and the bus was about to depart. With cover from other travelers, she quickly boarded the vehicle. Lucky watched the officers inspecting outside the window, convinced her infiltration had gone unnoticed. She had no idea the gang hitman had witnessed everything and was now tailing the bus in his car. On the bus, Lucky received a call from the prison. It was her father, John. He pressed her eagerly for updates on the plan. Not wanting to worry him, Lucky claimed everything was going smoothly. But no father knew his daughter better than John. He detected unease in her tone and quickly pieced together what had happened. Before hanging up, he warned her never to trust others so easily. Neither of them could foresee that this caring phone call would bring grave danger to Lucky. Elsewhere, Detective Black reviewed hotel surveillance footage and chanced upon the gang hitman tracking Lucky. She recognized him as the right-hand man of the crime boss behind the biofuel fraud. For years, Black had been trying to apprehend the boss, and now her chance had arrived. She ordered her officers to find Lucky at all costs, before the hitman got to her first. It was not long before they traced Lucky's phone signal. Meanwhile, during the bus stop break, Lucky hid in a corner to avoid being spotted. Yet the next second, an officer lunged out from the side. Lucky turned and fled at once. She weaved nimbly through the gaps between freight trucks thanks to her slight frame. But her luck did not last long. She soon ran straight into a dead end. With officers closing in, she clambered onto the top of a truck, only to be cornered again shortly after. Summoning all her resolve, Lucky jumped straight off the cargo bed. Fighting through searing pain all over her body, she hobbled toward the exit. Yet officers were already waiting there. Just as despair began to settle over her, something unexpected happened. But when Lucky saw who had arrived, her blood ran cold. It was the gang hitman and his men. A middle-aged woman was also in the vehicle, Lucky's mother-in-law Sheila, who worked as the gang's accountant. It was from her that Lucky had stolen the money. Sheila ordered Lucky to hand over the cash immediately, warning that otherwise both of them would end up dead. Lucky wore a bitter expression and recounted everything that had happened, yet Sheila clearly refused to believe her. Moments later, 2 gang members climbed into the vehicle and forced Lucky into the trunk of another car. Fortunately, they only took her bag and did not search her person. Using a lighter her father had given her, Lucky managed to light up the confined space. She spotted signal flares and a screwdriver inside the trunk, and a plan quickly formed in her mind. Lucky burned through her restraints with the lighter, then quietly crept into the back seat. While the 2 gang members driving up front were distracted, she tossed a lit flare onto them. Flames engulfed the men instantly, sending the vehicle out of control. It crashed through a guardrail and tumbled down a mountainside. Lucky survived by sheer luck. She was the first to regain consciousness and crawl out of the wreckage. But seconds later, one of the gangsters also woke up. A brutal fight erupted between them in the desert. Wounded badly, Lucky stood no chance against him. At the critical moment, she pulled the screwdriver out of her pocket and struck the man dead. Exhaustion overwhelmed her, and she blacked out completely. After an unknown length of time, Lucky finally came to. She took whatever cash remained on the corpse, dragged the body back into the car, and set the vehicle ablaze to stage a fatal car explosion. Only then did she leave safely. She trekked across the Gobi for hours, yet there was nothing but yellow sand and withered grass as far as the eye could see. Severe dehydration began to take its toll, and she was on the verge of collapse. Then she spotted a wisp of smoke in the distance. Summoning her last ounce of strength, Lucky staggered toward the homestead. Meanwhile in prison, Sheila came to visit John. Their conversation made it clear they shared a complicated history. Sheila tried to pressure John into revealing where the stolen money was hidden, but he had no idea. Disappointed, Sheila took her leave. Back with Lucky, she finally reached the house. A venomous snake blocked her path, yet she had no time to hesitate. She picked up a rock and bludgeoned the snake to death before rushing toward a water tap to gulp down fresh water. A sudden click of a gun being chambered cut through the air. Lucky looked up and saw a woman aiming a firearm at her, with two frightened young girls standing behind her. Lucky quickly explained herself, fabricating a story. She claimed she was a traveler who had survived a car crash after wandering for hours, and she only wanted some water, harboring no ill intent. Convinced by Lucky's sincere demeanor, and considering she had killed the snake which had threatened her granddaughters, the woman invited Lucky inside to rest. She promised to drive Lucky to the nearest town afterward. The town lay 65 kilometers away. Lucky would never survive the trek across the wasteland on foot. Once inside, the woman fetched a first aid kit and dressed Lucky's wounds. At the same time, Detective Black and her team responded to a report and discovered the burned-out wreck of the vehicle. All evidence inside had been destroyed. Still, trusting her intuition, Black suspected the crash was linked to Lucky. The site was far too close to where Lucky had last been spotted. Her assistant disagreed. The two victims inside were grown men, and he could not fathom how Lucky could overpower both and escape. Black refused to dismiss her hunch. Using the time of the accident, she ordered her officers to launch a blanket search covering a 35-kilometer radius around the wreckage. Just then, a bald man approached Black, her superior. He brought two pieces of bad news. First, the officer struck by the gang hitman would be confined to a wheelchair for life. Second, he disapproved of her deploying manpower based merely on intuition and demanded solid evidence. Black shared what she had uncovered. Sheila had recently been released from prison. She had long sought to arrest the gang boss, and this was her perfect opportunity. As the boss's trusted accountant, if Sheila recovered the stolen money from Lucky, authorities could tie her directly to the biofuel fraud. With further interrogation, Sheila would surely implicate the gang leader, allowing police to arrest the entire ring lawfully. Tempted by the major breakthrough, the superior hesitated. There were countless variables at play, yet after brief consideration, he approved Black's plan, warning her not to let the situation spiral out of control before departing. The scene shifts back to Lucky. Despite the family's kindness, she trusted no one and kept scanning her surroundings, ready for any emergency. The woman noticed her anxiety and offered to contact her family for her. Lucky looked troubled, so the woman sent her granddaughters to their rooms to ensure they could not overhear. Lucky admitted she had nowhere to go. She lied that she had fought with her husband, who had pushed her out of their car, leading to the crash. Moved by her tragic tale, the woman intended to call the police. For Lucky, that would be walking straight into a trap, so she hastily claimed her husband was an officer. The woman abandoned the idea of contacting authorities. She asked Lucky what she planned to do next. As she spoke, sorrow flickered across the woman's face. Her own daughter had endured a similar ordeal once. Yet she was not as fortunate as Lucky, leaving only these two girls behind. Watching the woman's dejected figure, Lucky's heart was filled with tangled emotions. She had never meant to reopen old wounds, yet one lie always demanded countless more to cover it up. Elsewhere, Sheila set out to recover the stolen funds by checking every car rental shop nearby. Claiming to be Carrie's mother, she soon tracked him down at one rental agency. Rental companies installed multiple trackers in their vehicles. After slipping the clerk a hefty tip, she learned the car's current location. Sheila immediately contacted the hitman, only to find out Lucky was still alive. The assassin was busy hunting Lucky and could not break away. Left with no choice, Sheila headed to the shopping mall alone to find her son. When she spotted the vehicle, her brows drew tight. The windows were smashed, covered in shards of glass and trash, making it look like the scene of a robbery. Sheila barely held out any hope, but while rummaging through the mess, she discovered a scrap of paper with an address. Clutching this sole clue, she rushed straight to the location. However, the homeowner was not Carrie. When Sheila asked whether he had seen her son, the man insisted he had never heard the name Carrie. Sheila refused to believe him. She pulled out her pistol and shot him through the foot, then ordered her men to take him away for harsh interrogation. Right then, she received a message from the crime boss summoning her to report. Sheila had no option but to go. The boss cut straight to the chase, demanding to know how much longer it would take to retrieve his money. From the start, he blamed Sheila for everything going wrong. Sheila fired back. She had warned the boss long ago that the money was pouring in far too fast, leaving her no time to fabricate fake accounts, and begged him to slow down. But greed had blinded him, and he refused to pause operations, leaving the accounts in utter chaos. If she had not proposed the biofuel scam, he would never have gotten his hands on such a huge sum. Ultimately, the crime boss was the root of all their troubles. Rendered speechless by her rebuttal, the boss grabbed Sheila by the neck, venting his rage. He warned her that if the money was not recovered soon, both she and Carrie would pay with their lives. With that, he stormed off. Meanwhile, Lucky was telling the two girls stories of her past. For the girls who had never left the Gobi Desert, her simple tales filled them with longing. A phone ring cut her off. Seeing the incoming call originating from prison, Lucky knew it was her father. She dared not answer. Even so, she could not shake her pursuers. Using satellite maps, the hitman found only a handful of homesteads within a 35-kilometer radius. He was certain Lucky was hiding there. At the same time, Detective Black spotted the distant houses through binoculars and immediately ordered her officers to surround the property. Inside the house, Lucky heard noises outside and saw Detective Black closing in. She quickly calmed the woman, lying that the officers were her husband's colleagues, and begged her not to reveal Lucky's presence. The woman hid Lucky in her granddaughter's bedroom and went outside to confront Black alone. Before she left, Lucky grabbed a dinner knife from the kitchen for self-defense, keeping a close eye on the woman through the crack in the door. As soon as Black stepped up to the door, she stated her purpose. The woman initially tried to cover for Lucky, but the seasoned detective instantly sensed her unease. Claiming she was thirsty, Black talked her way inside. The woman had said she lived here only with her two granddaughters, yet 4 freshly washed plates sat on the kitchen shelf, proof a fourth person was inside. Black pulled out Lucky's wanted poster and elaborated on the crimes Lucky was accused of. The woman's expression darkened. Seeing the situation turning against her, Lucky moved quickly to save herself. She won the girls' sympathy with her injuries, then told them she needed to step out for a moment, urging them to stay quiet and never tell anyone outside. Lucky slipped out through a window in another room. Following Black's instructions, the woman sent the girls to bed. Now certain Lucky no longer held any hostages, Black rushed into the bedroom to search, only to find it empty. Before fleeing, Lucky had taken the dinner knife and stolen the woman's truck keys. She climbed into the truck and drove off right in front of Black. Black attempted to block her path, but discovered Lucky had slashed her vehicle's tires with the knife. As she fled, Lucky recalled her father's old warnings. His years of guidance had allowed her to escape danger time and again. Still, misfortune dogged her. The truck's fuel gauge soon dipped toward empty. At that moment, the hitman's car passed her by. A radio broadcast from Detective Black aired, urging locals to watch for the stolen truck. The hitman immediately pieced together what had happened. He executed a sharp U-turn and raced after Lucky. Lucky reached a nearby gas station just before the fuel ran out. She had barely handed over payment when she spotted the hitman closing in. Lucky ducked for cover, yet he caught sight of her. He fired without hesitation, shattering bottles of liquor on the shelves. Cornered, Lucky had a sudden idea. She pulled out her lighter and ignited the spilled alcohol. Flames leapt up and engulfed the hitman's trousers. Lucky seized the chance to run outside. The hitman calmly put out the fire on his clothes with an extinguisher before chasing after her. Huddled in a corner, Lucky fought to steady her breathing. Just as the hitman was about to find her, police sirens echoed in the distance. Reluctantly, he withdrew. Once he was gone, Lucky cautiously peeked out. With police fast approaching, she made a daring choice. She slipped into the trunk of the hitman's car and rode along as he evaded law enforcement. Lucky hid in the killer's truck bed for an unknown length of time. Outside, the sky had turned fully bright. The vehicle finally came to a stop. The killer walked into a stable. Lucky cautiously followed to take a look. To her surprise, a man was being held captive inside. He was the poor fellow Sheila had brought back. By now, the killer had tortured him to the brink of death. Even so, the man insisted he had never known Carrie. He kept begging the killer to set him free. But the gang wanted answers. They would never back down until they found Carrie's whereabouts. The killer immediately cut off one of the man's fingers. Even then, no information about Carrie could be pried out of him. At that moment, Sheila walked in. His patience had long worn thin. He gave the man one final chance. If he still refused to reveal where Carrie was, death would be his only fate. Yet the man truly had no idea where Carrie could be. Seeing this, Sheila ordered the killer to dispose of the man. Hiding in the corner, Lucky witnessed everything. She forced herself to stay calm. Only when all sounds outside died down did she quietly open the fence gate. The corpse lying before her was her only lead to her missing husband. Taking advantage of the lack of attention, she quickly searched the dead man's belongings. She found a driver's license on his body, learning that he lived in Los Angeles. Lucky decided to head for Los Angeles to track down Carrie. Back inside the building, the killer began to wonder if Lucky's story was true, that Carrie had stolen all the money and fled. He could tell that Lucky shared the same look in her eyes as the tortured man. Based on clues from Sheila's investigation, the killer theorized that Carrie might have been robbed while transporting the cash. If that were the case, the situation would be catastrophic. They might never recover the money. Sheila instinctively wanted to dismiss this possibility, yet he knew it held merit. He vented his rage by slamming the table, but it did nothing to improve their predicament. Meanwhile, Black's sister and her team learned that Lucky was connected to the gas station fire from the previous night. They also uncovered Carrie's car rental records from a rental agency. Black's sister split up with her assistant Black Xiao. She would keep chasing Lucky, while Black Xiao tracked Carrie. Black's sister pulled surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store. The camera clearly captured Lucky climbing into the killer's truck. The scene shifts back to Lucky. After escaping from Sheila's place, she chanced upon a house throwing a party. An idea struck her. First, she quietly opened the mailbox by the gate and learned the host's name from the envelopes. Then she spotted a guest child throwing a tantrum. She instantly improvised, claiming she had been hired by the host to look after the child. The guest suspected nothing and handed the boy over to her. Glancing at the name printed on a red envelope, Lucky struck up an easy conversation with the little boy. The security guards assumed she was a friend of one of the guests. Without an invitation or any personal introduction, she smoothly slipped into the mansion. Once inside the villa, things became simpler. Lucky quickly scanned her surroundings and mapped out her next move. It was a child's birthday party, and everyone's attention was fixed on the boy. She slipped quietly upstairs under the pretense of using the restroom and began checking each room one by one. Before long, she found the homeowner's walk-in closet. She did not rush to act. Instead, she waited until no one was watching before darting inside. The closet was filled with lavish clothes, enough for her to transform into a completely different person. She took off her cheap coat and put on an upscale silk evening gown. She swapped her heavy cowboy boots for elegant high heels. Next she opened the hostess's jewelry box brimming with accessories. In less than 3 minutes, she had undergone a dramatic transformation from a menial helper to a party guest of high status. All she needed was a quick touch-up of her makeup, and she could make her escape. But when she pushed open the dressing room door, she was shocked to find someone else inside. Lucky instantly realized this stranger was also there to steal clothes. She pretended to be another thief just like her. The woman did not suspect a thing. She even gave Lucky a few tips as if she were an experienced veteran. While engaging the woman in conversation, Lucky discreetly wiped a tiny trace of blood off her face with saliva to avoid arousing suspicion. Their chat grew increasingly natural. Together they mocked the house owners, acting as if they were old friends of the family. After talking for a while, Lucky turned the woman into her human shield. They walked together toward the main party area, and nobody questioned Lucky's identity. The children's birthday song started playing. While everyone was distracted, Lucky's eyes drifted toward the wallets and cards guests had left in a corner. Her father's teachings echoed in her mind. John had not meant true invisibility. He had taught her how to exploit people's inherent dismissiveness to occupy their mental blind spot, achieving psychological invisibility. As all eyes turned toward the birthday celebration, Lucky moved fast and pocketed the wallets and cards. Having succeeded, she left the villa without hesitation. When she picked up her car, she tipped the attendant handsomely. The gate security would never recognize her as the woman who had earlier tended to the child. Driving the stolen vehicle at full speed, Lucky headed for the dead man's apartment, hoping to find clues about Carrie. Yet when she unlocked the door, disappointment washed over her. The place was in total disarray. Sheila's men had obviously ransacked every corner, leaving little hope of finding useful evidence. Still, since she was already there, she kept searching. She discovered the dead man's cell phone was still on site and opened it. Unfortunately, there were no new notifications. She carefully wiped her fingerprints off the screen. After searching the entire flat and finding nothing of value, she prepared to leave. Then she noticed garbage bags by the front door. The man had been taken away days ago. There should have been no fresh trash here. Something dawned on her. She hurried over to the partially obscured house number and uncovered a vital clue. 2 separate households shared this address. Lucky pushed through to the backyard and knocked on the neighbor's door. A woman answered, her eyes full of wariness. She asked Lucky's purpose using coded street slang, but Lucky did not know the correct reply. So she could only vaguely tell the woman that she needed some help. The woman asked how she had found this place. Lucky lied on the spot that she had been referred by someone. The woman sized her up carefully before letting Lucky inside. It was then that Lucky learned the woman made fake identities. Lucky lied that she was getting a divorce and wanted to keep her deadbeat ex-husband from tracking her down. In truth, her heart was torn, filled with memories of Carrie. The flash of a camera snapped her back to harsh reality. The woman gave Lucky several templates to choose from, and one of them belonged to Carrie. Lucky immediately headed straight for Carrie's new address. On the way, she received a call from her father John in prison. Afraid his daughter would let emotions cloud her judgment, John warned her that the money was the top priority. She must not let the urge for revenge ruin everything. If Carrie was capable of stealing all the money and running away, he was capable of far worse. Lucky verbally promised to stay calm, yet her complex eyes betrayed her inner unrest. Soon Lucky arrived at the address on the fake ID, a rented vacation villa with tight security. She had no way to get in, but quickly came up with a plan. That night, she lurked at the busiest nearby bar, keeping her eyes on a man across the room. She had already found out he was the real estate agent for this vacation villa and must hold the house keys. Dropping subtle hints, Lucky lured the agent over to her. Now that her target had taken the bait, she moved on to the next step. She pretended to be heartbroken from a breakup in need of comfort, drank a few drinks on purpose, and acted thoroughly drunk. Seeing his chance, the agent invited Lucky back to his place for coffee, and she reluctantly agreed. Once inside, the man wasted no time taking off his coat while Lucky collapsed onto the sofa as if heavily intoxicated. He pulled her into his arms, but at that moment Lucky said she needed to call her best friend to check in. Claiming her own phone was dead, she asked to borrow his. Driven by lust, the agent failed to realize he had walked right into a trap. The next second, Lucky sobered up completely with no trace of drunkenness. She told him plainly she had sent evidence of everything going on here to his wife. If he wanted to save his marriage, he had to hand over the villa keys and access code. The agent finally realized he had been set up, yet he had no choice. Lucky got hold of the villa keys. That night, Lucky tossed and turned in bed, and a memory from years ago surfaced in her mind. Years earlier, Sheila had secretly worked with Lucky's father John. John had bribed an official from the California Energy Commission to illegally obtain a one-year regulatory permit, helping the crime boss run a biodiesel fraud scheme. Back then he had already planned to steal money from the boss. He deliberately accelerated project revenue so fast that Sheila could not keep up with the accounting. Lucky had voiced her objections at the time, but John paid her no mind. What they did not know was that Black Sister had been keeping tabs on them ever since. Back in the present, Lucky returned to the villa and slipped inside with ease. First she peered through the window at the ground floor living room. Satisfied it was empty, she crept upstairs. Carrie was not there, the whole floor was deserted. Just as Lucky turned to leave in disappointment, she spotted a familiar figure walking toward the ocean. It was Carrie. She fought the urge to confront him right away. Heeding her father's warning, she intended to reclaim what was hers first before settling scores with him. Lucky rummaged frantically through the rooms. She grabbed a knife from the kitchen and cut open every possible hiding spot for cash. She ripped apart sofas, cushions and high-end bedroom mattresses, yet found nothing. At last she flipped open the laundry basket on the floor and found a green backpack. Inside were only a handgun and a laptop, no cash. Opening the laptop, Lucky learned Carrie had deposited all the cash in a bank, which could only be withdrawn with a 12-word passphrase. Right then, Carrie came home. He stepped in to see the place torn apart. Realizing danger, he tried to flee, only to find Lucky standing nearby pointing a gun at him. Carrie had no choice but to raise his hands and surrender. Meanwhile, Black Sister confronted Sheila, demanding she hand over Lucky. Sheila had no idea Lucky had hidden in the killer's truck. Only moments earlier, she had ordered the killer to execute the man and the body had just been disposed of. When Black Sister showed up, Sheila assumed her crimes had been uncovered and kept making excuses to cover up what had happened inside. Black Sister noticed Sheila was acting strange but paid it little mind. She told Sheila Lucky had hidden in the killer's truck the night before. Sheila's eyes widened in shock. Seeing her reaction, Black Sister confirmed Lucky was no longer here and turned to leave without further pressing the matter. After leaving, Black Sister ordered her men to investigate everyone who had bought a car with cash in the past 2 days. She was convinced Carrie would use the stolen money to buy a new vehicle. Her subordinates resented her intuition-driven investigative methods but obeyed out of respect for her authority. Soon Black Shao sent word they had traced Carrie using his fake identity and pinpointed the vacation villa where he was hiding. At the same time, Sheila also received a call from the crime boss. Somehow, he too had found out where Carrie was hiding. Now both factions had set their sights on the vacation villa. How would Lucky and Carrie escape alive? Inside the villa, Lucky fought back her rage and forced Carrie to give her the account passphrase. Carrie tried to explain, but Lucky was in no mood to listen. She slapped him hard across the face. Stung by her cold-blooded reaction, Carrie finally snapped and dropped a bombshell. Everything he had done was meant to protect Lucky. It turned out that right after Sheila got out of prison, Carrie went home to visit her. He learned the crime boss had posted her huge bail to get her released. There was no such thing as a free lunch. The boss had found out John was stealing his money, and he had freed Sheila so she could recover the stolen funds. What Sheila did not know was that her son had married Lucky while she was behind bars. Sheila urged her son to leave Lucky, but Carrie loved her deeply and flat out turned down the crime boss's offer. Seeing how stubborn her son was, Sheila revealed a terrible secret. She and John had been arrested because Lucky had acted as an informant for the police. Carrie froze on the spot. He could not believe the woman he loved was the one who had landed his mother in prison. Yet the facts spoke for themselves. Lucky had also been arrested back then, only to be released shortly afterward. Sheila told her son that if he still refused to walk away from Lucky, she would disown him. She promised that if Lucky handed over the money, she would persuade the crime boss to spare her life, otherwise Lucky would have to die. Sitting on the sofa for a long time in silence, Carrie made up his mind to steal the money. Lucky had never known this dark chapter behind everything. She tried to explain to Carrie that she had had no other choice. Years before, through John's connections, Sheila had bought massive volumes of natural gas at rock-bottom prices and resold them at high rates using shell companies. She thought she had covered her tracks, but Black Sister had already gathered clues. She secretly approached Lucky and laid out the danger. If the scheme collapsed, the gang would pin all the blame on John. To save her father and her boyfriend, Lucky agreed to become Black Sister's informant. Her one condition was that Black Sister grant immunity to both Carrie and John. Shortly afterward, the police arrested John and Sheila. But Black Sister broke their deal and failed to get John released. Lucky confronted her, only to be told John was too deeply implicated for immunity. Betrayed, Lucky cut all ties with Black Sister. After hearing Lucky's story, Carrie fell silent for a moment. He told her he had never given the money to his mother. He admitted he had once intended to return the funds to the gang to keep Lucky safe. That was why he had drugged Lucky's drink in Las Vegas, laid her gently back in bed and left a glass of water on the table. When he showed up at the handoff point to give the money to Sheila, he saw his mother chatting casually with the killer. A surge of anger welled up inside him. He refused to be his mother's pawn any longer, so he walked away. He meant to go back to the hotel and wake Lucky, only to find Black Sister and her team closing in. He knew Lucky was more than capable of shaking off the police. The real priority was to hide the 2 cases of cash without delay. He secretly deposited the $10 million fund into various ATMs in batches. After working the whole day, he converted all the cash into digital currency, keeping only $100,000 for buying a car and obtaining a new identity. Then he came to this villa. He had known Lucky would track him down, just not this fast. Now that everything was out in the open, they finally understood each had acted to protect the other. All past rifts melted away. Before they could rejoice in their reconciliation, loud, urgent knocks echoed at the door. Black Sister and her men had arrived. Law enforcement officers smashed their way inside, only to find the villa empty. An engine roared. Lucky and Carrie crashed straight through the garage and burst out of the police perimeter. Black Sister ordered an immediate pursuit, and a high-speed highway chase ensued. Anticipating Lucky would not surrender peacefully, Black Sister had coordinated with local authorities beforehand. A helicopter circled overhead, locking onto their vehicle. Lucky knew they could not keep fleeing like this. Spotting an identical car driving beside them, she got an idea. She accelerated to catch up with it, then slammed on the brakes as they passed an overpass. The helicopter could no longer tell which vehicle to follow. By the time police reached the underpass, the pair had already abandoned the car. They vanished into a thick crowd. Lucky planned to withdraw the money and disappear forever. Just then a car pulled up right in front of them. It was Sheila and the killer. Lucky turned and ran. After a split second's hesitation, Carrie ran too. They darted one after another into an underground parking garage. Lucky approached a driver, claiming she was being stalked by a creep and begging for help. The driver caught sight of Carrie and fled in fright. Lucky had never really counted on his rescue. She only needed an excuse to get close. In those few seconds, she had stolen his car keys. They jumped into the stolen vehicle and kept running. Once inside, they argued over their next move. Lucky suggested heading inland for countless escape routes. Carrie insisted they should go south and cross the border for true safety. Mid-argument, a police patrol car pulled alongside them. As long as they stayed calm and avoided nervous glances, they could get through the short red light stop. Lucky, raised for such situations, kept her composure. Carrie's nerves got the better of him, and he stole a glance toward the officers. Fortunately, they did not notice. Once the police car drove off, they sped away again. After further thought, Carrie decided to follow Lucky's plan. At that moment, the gang's vehicles came after them. A mother knew her son well. Sheila had already worked out their escape logic. To shake off the pursuit, Lucky swerved across the oncoming lane, triggering a multi-vehicle crash. She could not afford to care about the consequences. Sheila and the killer stayed hot on their trail. Lucky wove through traffic with sharp driving skills and nearly lost them, only to draw more police attention because of their reckless speeding. Now both sides were being hunted. Seeing this, Sheila called off her chase. Though one pursuer was gone, Lucky felt no relief. She knew the police knew the city thoroughly and outnumbered them. Tangling with them in narrow streets was a death sentence. They had to break free. Carrie understood this too. To save Lucky, he chose to sacrifice himself. He apologized sincerely to her, saying he never regretted being with her. He leaned out of the window and opened fire at the pursuing police cars to buy her precious time. He succeeded. Bullets blew out the tires of a patrol car, causing a pileup. But Carrie was shot in the abdomen. Blood soaked his shirt. Bullets also struck Lucky's car tires, and the vehicle flipped over. Holding her dying husband in her arms, Lucky burst into tears. She had only just reconciled with her husband, yet they were torn apart by death. Lucky kept calling Carrie's name, but he never responded. Soon Black Sister hobbled onto the scene, yet Lucky was already gone. From a distance, Sheila arrived and caught sight of her son's body. She broke down completely. The killer hurried her away before the police could spot her. Lucky had not fled far. She returned to the multi-car crash site with Carrie's backpack and slipped into a random vehicle. Seeing an injured elderly passenger beside her, Lucky was overwhelmed with guilt and could only whisper a quiet apology. She quickly grabbed the old man's driver's license and memorized his name. Rescue officers arrived shortly afterward, and an idea struck her. She pretended to be an injured passenger, claiming the elderly man was her grandmother, and escaped aboard an ambulance. Before she could get away, a medical worker stopped her. The old man was critically hurt and required a family member's signature for surgery. Mistaken for his next of kin, Lucky had no choice but to give a false name. Delayed by the exchange, crash-related injuries began to take their toll. Dizziness washed over her. Then she spotted Black Sister, also injured, being wheeled into the same medical facility. Lucky knew she had to leave at once. She asked for water to send the doctor away, yet she fainted after taking only a few steps. When she regained consciousness, she lay in a hospital bed. Relieved, she spotted her backpack still resting on the chair beside her. The doctor told her to rest, but knowing Black Sister was in the same building, Lucky could not relax. As soon as the doctor left, she grabbed her bag and forced herself to sneak out. Covered in blood, she would surely be stopped before reaching the exit. She headed for the restroom to wash the blood off her clothes. A young girl came in crying. Lucky handed her a tissue and asked what was wrong. The girl said her beloved relative might die, and their last words to her had been, "I hate you." This reminded Lucky of her own childhood. She had often told her father she hated him, only to realize later that he loved her deeply yet could not express it. Lucky advised the girl to open up to her parents. The girl fell deep in thought. Lucky had no idea this child was Black Sister's daughter. After leaving the hospital, Lucky checked into a hotel and requested the cheapest available room. Using her pre-prepared fake ID, she finished the check-in smoothly. Once her nerves calmed, memories of her father flooded back. Young and naive, she once asked John what good and evil meant. Instead of giving her simple definitions, John used distance from the sun as a metaphor. He told her pure evil did not truly exist, there were only varying distances from goodness. Good and evil were human-made concepts. In nature, a lion hunting an antelope does not judge its actions as right or wrong, it merely survives. Dwelling on good versus evil was meaningless. This vague philosophy had confused Lucky for years. Survival had always been her top priority, with morality nothing more than empty talk. But after causing the car crash, she began to wonder whether she herself was the root of all evil. Lucky went to a bar and ordered the cheapest whiskey, hoping heavy drinking would clear her mind the next morning. This was her old trick. Strangers in bars would often cover her hotel bill. This time, however, she turned down a man's advances. He felt terrible for missing his daughter's birthday because of a cancelled flight. His remorse stirred complex feelings inside Lucky. This father worried how his absence would affect his child's growth, yet her own father had never thought about such things. In that moment, she understood kindness lived in small details. She resolved to change, starting with simple acts such as paying for her own room. Meanwhile, crushed by her son's death, Sheila unleashed her rage at a shooting range. She had Carrie cremated and held a memorial service. She had expected the crime boss to attend, yet not even a single flower arrived. Sheila became utterly disillusioned with him. After the ceremony, she scattered her son's ashes across the sea, hoping the pain would fade away. The killer found her and said someone wished to see her. To her shock, it was Lucky. The atmosphere turned icy. Sheila demanded to know why she had come. Lucky admitted she had come to take responsibility. Since Carrie alone knew where the money was, the secret had died with him. Sheila refused to accept this. If the funds could not be recovered, the crime boss would kill her. She ordered Lucky to get the money back by any means, threatening to kill Lucky before she herself died. Lucky had anticipated this reaction. Back in her car, she flew into a fit of rage and squeezed Carrie's old teddy bear for comfort. Suddenly, Carrie's voice played from inside the toy. He had pre-recorded the 12-word passphrase and hidden it inside the bear for her. Lucky entered the passphrase, and the $10 million fund appeared on her screen. Still, she felt no joy. Carrie had given his life for this money. Elsewhere, Sheila met the crime boss alone. Their conversation revealed Carrie was also his biological son. Cold-hearted, the boss cared only about money and had skipped his own son's funeral. In his eyes, Sheila had already received sufficient compensation over the years. From the moment Carrie stole the money, he had been marked for death. He pressed a gun to Sheila's head and gave her a deadline to deliver the money. Sheila sank into overwhelming grief and despair. At home recovering from her injuries, Black Sister kept working. Her daughter recognized Lucky from their hospital encounter after seeing her photograph in a case file. Black Sister pressed for every detail of their conversation. Learning Lucky still clung to thoughts of John, she devised a bold plan. John, still supposed to be in prison, unexpectedly received early release together with a $200 government stipend. The first thing he did after getting out was call his daughter. Lucky instantly saw through Black Sister's scheme. With all other leads exhausted, releasing John was her best trap. But Lucky had changed. She decided to play along and put an end to all of her troubles once and for all. So she arranged to meet her father at their old spot and told him she had successfully obtained the money. Before long, the two arrived at the meeting place, where Black Sister and her team had already surrounded the area. Minutes later, father and daughter were arrested on site. Yet Lucky showed no sign of panic. She even seemed somewhat eager. Both of them were soon taken back to the police station. Lucky had little trust in Black Sister, but she knew exactly what the woman wanted. Getting straight to the point, Lucky laid out her terms. She demanded all charges against herself and her father be dropped, along with a substantial sentence reduction for John. Black Sister immediately pushed back, arguing the money was not enough to buy immunity for both of them. John was only bait and would be sent back to prison within an hour. Lucky upped her offer, promising to cooperate with police to apprehend Sheila. Even so, this still failed to satisfy Black Sister. At her signal, Black Shah stepped forward and read out a long list of serious felony charges against Lucky. If prosecuted on those counts, Lucky would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Black Sister then added that she would see to it John was transferred to Florence Prison. Lucky's expression darkened. That facility housed America's most dangerous and violent inmates under brutal, inhumane conditions. Black Sister stated she would spare them both only if Lucky helped arrest both Sheila and the crime boss. The crime boss, however, never appeared in public and always distanced himself from criminal activity, making him nearly impossible to catch. With no other options left, Lucky agreed to Black Sister's demands. Once their deal was struck, Black Sister promised to contact a judge for formal written immunity documents. Father and daughter were placed under house arrest in a hotel, granting them a brief moment of peace. Lucky brought up their old dream of settling by the sea and admitted she was worn out by life on the run. Once the operation was over, they could finally live in peace. John thought his daughter was joking. He could not bear to give up the $10 million. Their sharp disagreement erupted into a fierce argument. Years' worth of pent-up grievances burst out of Lucky. She accused her father of ruining her childhood, constant moves to evade creditors, no permanent room, no friends her own age, living every day with guilt over cons and fear of arrest. Even Lucky was not her real name. Night after night, she feared John would get hurt, leaving her all alone. John had always promised one last big score would end everything, yet that day never came. Still John remained stubborn, insisting on keeping the money. Seeing how unyielding her father was, Lucky laid bare the truth behind the natural gas fraud case. Without her intervention back then, John would have fared far worse. It finally dawned on John that his own daughter had been the police informant responsible for his arrest. He shouted insults at Lucky and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Lucky was left drowning in hurt, wishing her father would let go of his obsession with dirty money. The next day, Black Sister arrived with paperwork. Reluctantly, John signed it. Black Sister then revealed her plan to Lucky. Lucky would lure Sheila and the others to a police-ambushed hotel for a money handoff. She would wear a tiny hidden camera to record their incriminating statements. After Lucky left, John mocked Black Sister for using such underhanded tactics to get what she wanted. Black Sister crushed his self-righteous posturing with one line, "I didn't turn my kid in." Shortly afterward, Lucky met Sheila, claiming she had located the money Carrie had stolen. She wanted to return it directly to the crime boss and asked Sheila to arrange a meeting so she could earn a promise of full amnesty. Strange as the request sounded, Sheila hesitated for a few seconds and agreed. But the hotel would not work as the meeting spot. The crime boss was extremely cautious. To avoid raising suspicion, Lucky left only a phone number and walked away. Before departing, she asked how Sheila had found Carrie's rented beach house. She learned the address had been supplied by the crime boss. Back at the hotel, John finally reflected from a father's perspective and admitted Lucky had done the right things. He sincerely apologized to his daughter, and their long-standing rift melted away in a hug. That night, Lucky received Sheila's reply. The crime boss would meet her at a natural gas receiving terminal. The site had only one access road, leaving no room for prepositioned officers. The nearest observation post was several kilometers away. Lucky's safety depended entirely on Black Sister and one other agent. Police fitted Lucky with a button-style listening device. The smartphone she would use to display the bank account had been implanted with malware. The moment the crime boss logged in, Black Sister's team would move in for arrest. Before setting off, John warned her, dangerous as the crime boss was, she should watch Sheila even more closely. When the two were together, Sheila was a ticking time bomb. What John meant would soon become clear. Nearly all officers stationed at the hotel left with Black Sister, leaving only Black Shao and one other guard to watch John. Not long after the group departed, odd noises came from outside. Black Shao radioed his partner for confirmation but got no reply. Sensing trouble, he stepped out to investigate. An assailant leaped out. Black Shao reacted fast and shot the attacker dead. Immediately another figure emerged from behind him. Black Shao took 2 bullets and fell. Clutching his chest wound, he struggled to lift his head, trying to see the gunman's face, only to stare down the barrel of a gun. A single shot rang out, and all fell silent. Inside, John called anxiously for Black Shao. Seconds later, someone forced the door open. Meanwhile, Lucky rode toward the rendezvous with Black Sister. For no clear reason, she felt uneasy, convinced something would go wrong. Black Sister noticed her anxiety and assured her she would keep Lucky safe. Even with that promise, Lucky's misgivings persisted. Elsewhere, Sheila prepared to leave. The killer handed her a wristwatch. Confused, Sheila listened as he explained it had been found among Carrie's belongings and might prove useful. Sheila accepted the watch with a heavy heart. Soon the crime boss's vehicle arrived. He studied the two of them and took only Sheila with him to the meeting site. Lucky and Black Sister had already reached the terminal. They briefly reviewed the operation. Black Sister stressed that Lucky must stay calm when facing the crime boss. Her only task was to record him admitting involvement in the biodiesel fraud. Everything else would be handled by law enforcement. Before moving into position, an officer gave Lucky the operation safety word, her sole proof of being a cooperating informant. The undercover officers pulled back 2 kilometers out to avoid early detection. Minutes later, the crime boss and Sheila arrived. Sheila sensed something might be off, yet stayed silent, bitter over how coldly her son's death had been dismissed. Impressed by Lucky's youth and capability, the crime boss extended an offer. He said he would let bygones be bygones if she came to work for him. Lucky turned him down without hesitation. She knew from Carrie that this man was Carrie's biological father, and she was well aware of his ruthless nature. Carrie had told her repeatedly he wanted nothing to do with him. Offended by her refusal, the crime boss dropped the friendly act. He ordered Lucky to hand over his money at once, promising her a quick death if she complied, otherwise she would suffer unimaginable torment. Lucky pulled a smartphone from her backpack and showed him the account balance. She told him the 12-word passphrase was required to withdraw the funds. Without it, he would never get the money, just as he had threatened her. Lucky insisted she would only hand over the passphrase once her safety was guaranteed. The crime boss kept his face entirely unreadable, as if he had already anticipated this response. At this point, Lucky confirmed her long-held suspicion. Right after Black Sister had located Carrie, the crime boss had immediately ordered Sheila and her men to hunt him down. There had to be a mole inside the police department. Based on everything she had observed these past few days, Lucky concluded that the corrupt officer was Black Sister's superior. Hearing this from her surveillance position some distance away, Black Sister instantly drew her gun and restrained her superior. Faced with Lucky's accusation, the crime boss openly admitted the theory. It made no difference that Lucky had found out. He had more than enough ways to force her to reveal the passphrase. The next moment, the crime boss's men dragged a bloodied man before Lucky. It was John, who was supposed to be secured inside the hotel. Covered in blood, he looked utterly beaten. Lucky's gaze turned ice cold. She warned the crime boss not to harm her father, or she would never give him the passphrase. The crime boss only gave a cold smirk. One of his henchmen punched John hard in the face. When Lucky still refused to speak, they beat John brutally. Before long John was barely conscious. Even so, he gritted his teeth and shouted at his daughter not to surrender the passphrase, or both of them would die here. Glancing at the crime boss's surrounding men, Lucky knew she could not fight her way out. Her only hope was that Black Sister would subdue the corrupt superior and bring backup quickly. 2 kilometers away atop a tower, Black Sister confronted her superior, demanding to know why he had betrayed the force. The man replied with contempt that police work was meaningless. They knew who the criminals were, yet technicalities and lack of evidence let culprits walk free. Since their efforts were doomed to fail anyway, he reasoned he might as well side with the crime boss for far greater profit. Shocked by his corruption, Black Sister ordered him to surrender and turn himself in once the operation ended. Before she could finish speaking, he lunged forward, snatched her pistol, and a fierce hand-to-hand fight broke out on the tower. Their skills were closely matched, and neither could gain the upper hand in a short time. Back at the terminal, several minutes slipped by. The crime boss's patience was running thin. No backup from Black Sister had arrived. Lucky realized she would have to rely on herself. The crime boss pressed her relentlessly for the passphrase, while John used his last bit of strength to yell at her to hold firm. After a moment of agonizing hesitation, Lucky made her choice. Disappointed by Lucky's decision, the crime boss pulled out his handgun. He was willing to write off the $10 million fund, yet he needed to set an example for future thieves. He handed the gun to Sheila and ordered her to execute the father and daughter herself. This would force Sheila to sever all ties with her past and bind her irrevocably to his criminal enterprise. Sheila stared at the pistol in silence. No one could tell what was going through her mind. She took the gun from the crime boss and slowly walked toward Lucky. Just as Lucky braced herself for death, Sheila suddenly spun the muzzle around and fired multiple shots directly at the crime boss. His men immediately drew their weapons, but the killer burst out from the shadows and swiftly took them all down. Meanwhile, the fight on the tower reached its climax. Fighting through her pain, Black Sister grabbed the dropped pistol and shot her superior in the head. In mere seconds, the whole situation had flipped. Mortally wounded, the crime boss begged Sheila for mercy, but she was completely done with her former lover. He died on the spot. Yet Lucky and her father were still not safe. The killer blocked their attempt to run and brought them back before Sheila. She glared at John. If he had never plotted to steal the money, none of this would have happened, and her son would still be alive. Unexpectedly, Lucky volunteered to die. Tired of running and hiding, she wanted to atone for all her sins. Sheila froze. Remembering Lucky's earlier visit and confession, she believed her remorse was genuine. After a short pause, Sheila chose to spare them. She ordered the killer to untie John. Lucky offered to return the $10 million money to Sheila, but Sheila shook her head. She had done so little for her son in life. Since Carrie had intended the money for Lucky, she would honor her son's final wish. Black Sister would not let the case rest just because the crime boss was dead. That night she visited Sheila's home and warned her that the investigation was far from over. Sooner or later she would catch Sheila red-handed. Elsewhere, Lucky and John patched up their wounds at a cheap motel. John's thoughts drifted back to the fortune. Lucky told him she had no intention of touching the money. John pretended to agree, yet kept probing for the 12-word passphrase. When Lucky woke up the next morning, her father was gone. The recording teddy bear had vanished with him. Knowing John all too well, Lucky had anticipated his move. When John played the toy bear, instead of Carrie's voice, he heard Lucky's final farewell message. She told him she was exhausted by this life. John would sacrifice anyone close to him for his own gain. She recalled how he had once pushed her, a non-swimmer, into a hotel pool just to get a free stay. She had nearly drowned, saved only by a passing stranger. John's first reaction had been to file a compensation claim against the hotel. Lucky had never received real familial warmth from him. She had only ever been his tool for making money. In the recording, Lucky declared they would go their separate ways and never see each other again. John sat in total silence. Freed from her father, Lucky felt an unprecedented sense of relief. Later, Black Sister received an anonymous delivery, a laptop and a note containing the 12-word passphrase. And so the story ends. Thank you for watching. Your likes, comments and follows mean a great deal to us. See you next time.